Wednesday. Normally I'm start at 2, but today I just thought I'd start earlier. And a lot of the reasoning behind that is that, I wrapped up the stuff that I had done this morning and I'm good to go. And there's people that stream in afternoons that I really want to get to their channels and see what they're doing. So I figured this would be the easiest way to go about doing that. Is stream earlier today so I can maybe pop in and visit some of what others are doing instead of having to watch videos afterwards. The problem with doing something the same time each day through the week is that it makes me overlap with others and miss chances to see what other people are up to. And it's hard because when you take a liking to what other people are doing, you don't want to miss it. Okay, so with that in mind, today I want to talk about a couple of fun things. The title of today is Study All You Can to Improve Your Art and How to Grow It Creatively. I find that a big challenge that I'm seeing lately is stagnancy. And so that's why I want to talk to what I want to talk to today. Because stagnancy does us no benefit, right? And that goes for me too. But before we get into that, today's page, what's my absurd process? This kind of fits in. The suggestion yesterday was from Chris B., who lives here in London, Ontario, Canada. And Chris's suggestion was, what is your absurd process? It was more of a question like, what is your absurd process? Because, he thinks it's silly how I go about doing what I do. And, it doesn't he can't put it in the sense about, because it's always different things that I'm trying and always different story approaches and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, how's that possible? So it wasn't meant in a negative way. It was just, if he watches this, I recognize that it wasn't meant negatively. But there's some measure of what's the secret sauce, and I have no secret sauce. So today's a funny page, responding to it in the sense of, here's a couple of tidbits of things that I actually do. But then, there's also the guy who I pay in jelly beans for his ideas. So, just silly fun, right? Can't be serious all the time. I'm going to jump over to the overhead. Now, I don't know if you've noticed in the last little while, but there's a lot of fine tweaking that I'm doing right now. I've got a bunch of different setup things going on. Like I built a rig for lighting, and I've been changing up the studio space to make it more and more conducive to just unencumbered creativity. And so, just the sense of bringing things together has really helped me out. So, but I've also got it set up now so that I can zoom in and out with the above camera, and its focus is all set up finally. And the consternation of others, it took a little bit longer than they would have liked for me to get to that stage. And again, it's a learning curve, right? I got materials where I got them laid out. I've got my bookshelves more organized. It's all these little stages. And so I'm going to do another video like I did 4 or 5 months ago, where I do a walkthrough of the studio space, because there's so much more going on in here now. Canvases set up that I'm working on for clients, and I've got I had 2 stations set up for drawing before, for one for client, one for myself, and to stream through. Now I just do everything at one spot. There's no necessity for a second drawing station when everything is available if I just work at one. And then I've got my digital area is now a solid 2 feet farther away. So if you see me turning and looking over here, and then when I'm up at the drawing table and I gotta lean back, that's fine. But, and it's not to dismiss the chat, it's not to dismiss engagement from people jumping in and taking part in, when I'm streaming. It's just, sometimes it gets a little distracting to, keep looking over. And so I'm going to keep looking over and checking occasionally, but not have it be ever present. So, yeah, things like that. So I'll do a little video tomorrow and put that up. All good things. Okay, so study all you can to improve your art, and it's how to grow creatively. There's an easy accommodation that we can get into with our creativity, that we're just working in one specific thing, and we're working in one specific approach, and that's fine and good. It is. I'm not going to invalidate any specific approach to art or any specific mode of creativity. It's coming from you, and if it's coming out of you and you're, even to the extent of assembly of supplied images and stuff like that, that's still coming out of you. But the challenge is progression and furthering of ourselves. I think that is a big issue for all of us. Now, because I primarily draw, I need to regularly further developing drawing, and there's a few different things that I can come together that I've put together on how to develop that and to build that out. As usual, I'm just this regular old fella doing what I'm doing, and by no means do I claim to be anything greater than. But even still, I think that there's things that any of us have that we can share with each other that can build things up and expand them for each other's creative journeys. Little. I've tried this, and you might want to, apply that. Oh, that looks like fun. Let me apply that. So, little examples like so. One of the things that I think about on a regular basis is, I talk often about when doing sequential illustration, like in any given page, you want to start in this corner and move to that corner, and no matter what the image is, and that's a given in the Western market for how images are illustrated to the reader. Whether it's left to right or upper left corner to bottom right corner or whatever that's a Western format. And the opposite is true for the Eastern format. So, but the fundamental rules are the same. Oh, pardon me. Excuse me so much. I apologize. You're trying to suppress this. Still going to stick around. Hiya, Yolanda. Welcome aboard. I came on earlier today so that there's a person here that I recommend everybody go check out. That's Devin Rex for Art. I'm one of the reasons that I started earlier today so that I can go and check out Devin Rex for Art's stream today because I'm a big fan of her work. So, anyhow, and on a side note, while Yolanda's here, I really love the images that you're constructing lately. Like, especially there was one that it was almost like we're going down the central plane of the image, and there's trees, and it's fantastic. Please go and look at some of the postings that Deborah Rex for Art has been doing, and you'll see exactly what I mean. Too kind. Start rumors like that. Okay, so back to what I was talking about. One of the things that we can do for ourselves to help grow is to figure out little mechanisms. And like I said, I'm an illustrator, so I think of mechanisms, that I can build up using mark making tools. But even still, this applies to collaging, and this applies to any kind of assembly of images whatsoever. Painting, doesn't matter, just illustration, so on and so forth. I like his flippers. My wife and I were watching a program, and a woman was, she made a claim and nobody believed her about a horrible instance that she went through, and that she's describing the perpetrator of it. It is the craziest sounding outfit that a person could ever wear, and it sounded like they were dressed in flippers and like a snorkel gear, and it's the worst disguise ever. And it turns out to be far more, far more sinister and horrible. And but at that early stage of that, as we're watching, like, did she just describe a guy wearing scuba gear, like with flippers? So that's where my brain just spins out. So this is me scribbling down this character, and then as the program goes on, it's like, oh no, this person's far more horrible. Well, here it is. So, okay, back to what I was talking about. One of the things that I do is that I am always looking at composition arrangement, and I'm always looking at scenes. And in scenes, I like to. There's Alex Toth was a absolutely brilliant artist who put forth something. This is where I first found out about it, was through Alex. But he suggested that we should look at any of our images in three tones. All right, your high contrast, your black and white, and an intermediate value, and whatever that is. Yolanda says, yeah, that was it. That's what we watched it last night. Anyhow, anyways, they got the baddie. So people are horrible. People can be horrible. Not everybody's horrible. So when I look at these three different planes, all right, and they really are kind of just different ways to divide up the planes. But when I look at these three different values of black, white, and an intermediate value, or a gray, or any other kind of tone that doesn't register as black or white. So when we start looking at scenes and images, and I keep repeating three characters into these environments, just to further a sense of involvement in foreground, midground, and background. So you got three values, terrible handwriting, and you've got foreground. Now, let me clarify this in a second, but foreground, midground, background, right? This is a really simplistic way to approach it. That is a stable thing. Foreground, midground, and background is stable, but the combination of these three values is not stable. And what I mean by that is you can have, it's not stable, so that you can have white, the information that's in the foreground can be very, very light, high contrast stuff, bordering to the, from just the simplistic details here, completely flare grayed out images. But you can also have that same foreground be, all this intermediate complexity of line and development. And you can also have the foreground information and characters in silhouette, so completely black grayed out. So with that in mind, that applies to each of these planes: is foreground, midground, background. Black in the front, gray in the middle, white at the back. Or white at the front, black in the middle, gray at the back. It doesn't matter the combination, as long as you're looking at things with a greater sense of depth. And one of the things that is a really great example of this is if you look at Disney's old animation process. They built a device, and I think it had 16 layers. I'm trying to remember, I can't quite. But when they would do these animations, they would illustrate different parts of the scene on a different cell, and they would place them on these different glass layers of this machine. And the interesting thing about this machine is they could turn little wheels at the side and raise and lower each of these shelves, and to change the depth, to change the areas that the camera is focusing on. So if the camera's up here and it's lowering down, and you've got these different levels moving up and down, so it looks like as we're moving down here, the foreground's getting closer, but the background's moving farther away because your two different things are doing that. That's how you'll see a lot of these old animated cartoons that Disney would do that would look like, we're literally moving through the landscape. So it's a similar mindset to that. So when you look at your foreground, your midground, your background, and you look at them in a combination of black, white, and we're going to say gray to make it simple. When you look at different combinations of that, it helps for you to visually and simplistically separate your images within your panel, within your composition, specific one single image composition. Now, it gets more and more complex when you start putting a number of panels side by side with one another and how those spaces relate and how the movement of lines move through the page overall. But we're not talking about that right now. We're just talking about the simple approach to the image. Okay, so when we look through our frame of reference, frame of reference, and which is the outline of our image, the shape of our image, that's our frame of reference, the frame that we're viewing whatever the image is through. And then we look at what is in the confines of that, utilizing those two tools. It's an interesting way to approach making an image. But there's one extra step to that sometimes we forget to talk about, and that is what's called thirds. And what thirds is this. It's dividing the image up. Are you ready for this? In thirds. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. But you can also divide it this way as well. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. So when you look at dividing your image in thirds, now you can change the way that we look at things, and you can change the different relationship of where things are placed within the composition. Like if you have, so I've got a number of little scribbles that I just started doing 5 minutes before we got going. If you look at this image at the top, okay, we'll start with this guy. And you put a line here, and you put a line here. There's your first third. Now, they don't always have to be exactly balanced and exactly equal. You can have a thin third and a thick third within the same span of the image. But then when we look at it like so, we can get tricky with this because there's a third way of doing thirds, which is doing diagonals as well. And this one fits an example of that, is because there's information here, and then there's information here. This is completely blacked out. This is the main body of our image, but this is just limited content at best. So this is another way of dividing up that panel that we're looking at. But if you look at this overall, you can divide. There's a line here. There's a line here. That's a crazy division of the thirds, but it's still a division. But what these things do is that they draw our eyes to those positions that cross over at the thirds. There's little places along those axes. Yolanda says, interesting. I've never thought about diagonal thirds. And I think that the more and more sophisticated we look at something, and different ways of utilizing the information we put in the composition, that's where it steps away from the next person. So if the standard is just to say horizontal and vertical, then we're losing out on the opportunity of trying to push that a little bit further in the case of diagonal. So I'm glad that we're somebody's gained something from that. So like when you look at, let's say, now on my device over here, I've got a bunch of, is that going to go in? I've just got a bunch of small little thumbnails of New York City streets. And so if I divide this, I put a little frame of reference down, and I divide it according to how the image is represented. The image is represented with buildings. In the first one that I'm choosing from, there's a building here, there's a building across from it, and then there's a tramway that runs over that. So at first it looks like, well, how does that work according to the principles that I've been talking about? Well, it does, because here's a horizon line that breaks up across here. Here's a heavy line that breaks up across there. So there's our first division in the image. The easy second is here to here and here to here. 1, 2, 3, right? But this crazy thing that's moving through this space divides this up like so. And it's just, so your focus of attention, if you cross all those lines over each other, you're looking right there. That's where your draw is it's drawing you right to the center point, right into here on the composition. Even though it looks incredibly basic, that's what it's doing. And the more that we can assess images like so, like I'll draw another one that has a more direct image where we've got two city sidewalk, like two sides of a street, and the high rises that are up above them. I'll just draw them out of panel just so you get an idea of what it is that I'm drawing here. And then we've got our perspective point. All of these things fall down to a point in the center, right? So if we're looking at our city street here, and then we imagine that whatever the other environment of the city is fogged out, whatever it is, give it a movie scene. But again, you can see this division of our page, 1, 2, 3, and then when you've got this section and this, like you've got a heavy dark area in a wedge, you've got this information down in the foreground in the body of the buildings, but you've also got 1, 2, 3 that moves across that way. So it's still is the rule of thirds. It's just a little more unconventional. But the more and more that we look at different images, the more and more that we'll start seeing it. So when I get into some of these landscape views on the side here with these 3 people in the foreground, and this one, let's say it's people riding their horses, and there's one behind the other, and then the third behind them. And they're moving in this diagonal axis forward. And there's this arch to the way that this presented itself. But then we've got this other landscape piece that's moving in an alternating arch. And it's got an intermediate tone, black, gray, and then there's that third one, white. We can also divide this as, because there's a degree of information in the front, there's basically our first third, okay? Because we've got this intermediate value that's poking through here, and this crossover effect, there's our second, and this flat bland sky, technically our third. So, another one here is guy in gray, guy in black, guy in gray. So now this is a little sneakier. Here's our horizon. Here's the top of their heads. Here's our sky, okay? And this information of the edge of the horizon as well sort of fits into a sky. If the light is fading back, it almost has to blend in together. We've got 2 different things happening. We've actually got 3, but to start off, we've got 2. There's our first, there's our second, right? And they both frame the dark guy in the center. So there's a balance of person in the middle, same space, and then this dark value in the center. 1, and we've already established this. 2, what we've also done is that in the drawing of this panel, if we're to look at it from overhead, then we've got this person standing here and his 2 friends standing there. The camera is looking maybe the edge of a road, and the camera is looking through them past the edge of the road to the mountains that are off in the distance. So, it sort of establishes a different sense of depth, especially because this person is larger in the image because they're closer to the foreground. So we can see a lot more of them, which is why they seem to be bigger than the other 2. And really, the 3 are the same size. It's another form of complexity. My eyes really looking. There's another form of complexity that's happening there. So it's not even just, horizontal, vertical, and diagonal. But now we're also talking about, really pushing into that foreground, midground, background aspect of it. And beyond just a division of placement in the composition, now we're talking about a division of scale. The scale getting larger as it gets closer to us, getting smaller as it goes away from us. So now we're implementing all 3 of these aspects. And the more that we're able to engage that, whatever it is that we're drawing, ideally, the more successful and the more approachable and easily readable our images are going to be. It's a fun way to break down stuff and to look at images that are created by other people, whether it's photography, whether it's illustrations or whatever, and to take a look at it for a quick second and see if you can apply this, and this. Now, a fun way to do that is by utilizing the simple basic shape principle that I always present as like the first step in figuring out how to draw things. If you start figuring out the basic shapes to represent these different characters of different buildings, different planes, and here I am sitting here, and there's a car over there that's up a little bit on a hill, and above that is a castle, and much higher at the top of the hill. So as we're trying to represent these different items and locations across our images, we can represent those by using, build-ups of basic shape. And the first one you see I've used triangular shapes. This is triangular shapes to represent trees. These are triangular shapes that are representing like the mountains in the distance. And this large construct, whatever it is, in this case, let's say a floating city, is another triangular concept. Because we're just looking at the basic shapes within it. The less you get, busy with how you're drawing stuff, and the more that you simplify, these studies, the more you're going to get out of it. For a couple reasons. One, because it forces you to look at things really abstractly. And 2, it expedites your process because you're not drawing all kinds of complexity. There's a strange thing that happens too, where you can look at the same image later on and go, oh, that's like a floating city or something. Just because you become a little more informed. Luna says it reminds me of Grover's explanation of mirror. And then he runs back and goes, fire! Yeah. That was so great. That was so fantastic at Sesame Street. Sesame Street was absolutely brilliant education for a lot of people. It really was. There's so many different things that we would learn that we didn't even realize that we were learning. Like a love for Pointer Sisters. With that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So, shapes is a great way to break down these compositions. So if we look at if we look at a street scene broken down into just these simple geometrics, well, it doesn't really represent a street scene. We're not overly concerned about that. We're just trying to use this to understand, this combination of placement throughout the entirety of the image. This, whether it's utilizing the rule of thirds, which it probably is, as if it's successfully reproduced someplace else. But it's understand like so in that understanding of placement, you've got the thirds, you've got foreground, midground, background, you've got this tertiary value system of white, gray, black, and how that's implemented into it. So when we're doing our study of it, it's really beneficial for us to break it down into simple geometrics. Now, over time, as you're doing this, as you're assessing things, you can start to be a little more complex in your shapes, so that your drawing follows less of the sort of blocky circle, square, triangle aspect of the composition, and starts allowing you to assess things like this. And so I know the foreground is like this in the image, so I'm going to draw it with this little piece of complexity because there's something interesting in those lines and that movement, especially when the second part of it is building tops that really do nothing for the lower part, but there's a sort of the image. But what there is there's a duplication in this little divoting in the environment that just it's those little things that make our eye go, oh, I like how the whole environment moves like this. And then when we draw this opposite building that's in the foreground on the other side, and it has its little pieces of information that push out into this other space, what that allows us is a continuation of some of these ideas into here. And so while at first we can draw it like so, well, as we get a little further along in our comprehension of these principles, is where you'll see you start drawing it like that. And then when you put your people into the foreground that are moving through the space, and then you apply them. We did a post it, pop that out a little further. You really push the contrast of these characters having these white figures moving into this gray environment, and have this black environment in the center, this black piece of the environment in the same composition. This action of these people in white moving across the diagonal axis in the composition towards this black environment gives a real sense of weight and balance. You're dividing this up into thirds, right? We've divided this into thirds. It's little steps. You do a good Grover. You. So this is far more complex than this is. It's the same thing. It's telling us the same information. It's just telling us the same information with a different degree of complexity. Throw our shadows for the building in, making sure to put an angle to that shadow. And again, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we've got thirds going this way, we've got thirds going this way, we've got thirds going this way, and there's your 1, 2, 3, 4 nexus points. So we're drawn to the center of the image and the action of these guys moving towards that. And it's figuring out these different things. And as we look at other images, it helps us to understand that. Like even something as basic as, let's say we have a panel, it's the start of the Pirates of the Caribbean type film. And you've got the flag that is Jolly Roger. So here's the top of the flag post, the very pinnacle of the boat, and our camera is going to move down that post and pull out at the same time as we get closer to the, so as more complexity comes into the image, we're pulling out and drawing more information in the frame. So that when we get down to the deck area and you see the captain and the first mate and all these other people running around on deck, but you start with an image like, like this, where we've got the flag billowing in the wind, and then you've got your Jolly Roger, I think it's a skull and crossbone, is the Jolly Roger on the flag. What even this is, here's a division of 1, 2, 3. Here's a division of 1, 2, 3, right? There's even this division within the flag itself. You've got 1, 2, 3, right? You've got all kinds of information going on. And so the more and more that stuff builds up, then the more interesting that shot is. And as this flag is flapping in the wind, and then our camera pans down, and we've got, the sails of the boat coming across, and we're still following down the same flagpole. So now as we're seeing the ship's sails and the camera's, like I said, pulling out, well, we've still got, there's this complex amount of information here, but there's the bottom of the flagpole there. So there's a third. Here's the complex information of the sails here. Here's these buoys on either side that frame it nicely. And then you get into this diagonal axis and division there. So it's just assessing images using these three basic ideas. And I guess it's four basic ideas. I apologize. So three basic ideas in a utilizing shapes in order to interpret. So it's a great way to grow, and it's a great way to further develop your way of seeing a composition, the way of seeing whatever images you're constructing. But even in assembly of a composition, and what I mean by assembly, when I'm drawing it, I have to think about all these factors. And a lot of times when people are drawing stuff, they'll scribble all these little layouts of how that might work or how it might not. And they'll do thumbnails and they'll do all kinds of approaches in order to structure their story page or to structure their story panel. But even when you're assembling something like using collage tactics or using stamping tactics or things like that, these things still apply. And the difference, a lot of time that people might not be cognizantly aware of why a piece feels more successful than another, is that it may well be because of some of these practices that are contained within this image and not contained within that image. And that's the thing about aesthetics. When we try to interpret what does the term aesthetics means, it's always this loosey-goosey sort of, it's what someone finds appealing. Okay, but how do we know what is aesthetically appealing and what isn't? And then it becomes this broken idea, because what is aesthetically appealing to me may not well be the same thing as it is to you. And what is supposed to be the aesthetically appealing thing to all of us, there's always outliers. There's always going to be people that go, nope, the only thing I think's good looking is a Ford F-150. So, aesthetics is what you find visually appealing. And the things that you're going to find aesthetically appealing are going to become different over time, because as your level of sophistication develops, because of the more things that you look at and make aesthetic assessments about, then the more that your sense of an aesthetic image is going to, like I said, structurally change. So there is basic components and basic rules, though, that generally we have a consensus of a continuance of those ideas through all kinds of different compositions. And that goes back to all kinds of historical representations. There are cave paintings that we look at done by primitive people that this one doesn't make any sort of logical sense, because it just seems like it's there's all these horses and things down here and some handprints at the top. But then when you stand back from said cave image, you may well see that the collection of hands is in this third, right? And then in the center area, there might be a person running with a spear, and along that bottom third is a field of bison. And another person with a spear in the midst of the bison. And, we the people go hunting for bison. Might be what it represents, but it's also working as a balanced image. And we don't necessarily notice those things off the hop. And so if that is something that is of benefit to people, to explore that, and then to explore how that applies to what you're doing, it will probably, and if it's something that you didn't consider so much beforehand, it will probably subjectively change how we make our images ourselves. And it's not saying that if you know these things, you're better than those that don't. Because my wife is an absolutely natural photographer. When I was in high school, I took photography, and I would watch people go through rolls and rolls of film. And how many different ways can you take a picture of your sneakers and have it still just look like these flat, boring images of your shoes, because there's no sense of composition. Your shoes off. If you're taking a photo of your shoe, and it's you've got your shoe here, right? Yeah, it's on the table. Okay, but this isn't doing anything, right? And they can take all kinds of photos that have this kind of a principle where something's off the panel and something's not necessarily centered or anything like that. And we're never going to look at those images and go, cool. But where you look at somebody else, like in this case, my wife Lori, who, she'll go for a walk in the woods and go, oh, I like how the sun's hitting those flowers. And she just walks away with a perfectly thirded image. It focused. It would be very frustrating to some people that, because others are with the big fancy Dan cameras and the big lenses, and they're taking a number of shots, and we go through them to look for that one that counts. And I can't tell you how many pictures that Lori's taken over the years where she literally walks up to something and goes, oh, click. And there it is. So having an understanding of how to make that aesthetically understandable image, whether it's pleasing to you or not, because while it might have all these principles in play, it's still an absolute horror show of a painting of something or drawing or photograph or whatever, of an image that's absolutely horrible to you. You can present it with all these underlying rules and principles as much as you want, but I still don't want to look at it because it's yucky, and whatever it is that you're doing, if you look at the application of these ideas and try to understand ways in which to convey characters' placement in space in an interesting kind of way, when you start getting into next stages of placement, so there's not just this horizontal line setting of your frame of reference, your camera, and you start doing really interesting things where you've got like, here's a character that we're looking up at. The camera's down below. It's looking up towards this person. So this arm's quite big. This arm's receded. We're seeing a lot of the bottom of their chin as we're looking up at this giant. There's a superimposed figure over top of the screen, which gives a sense of power to them and disempowerment to the viewer. When we start looking at different angles, the things like that, you'll still find that here he is in this room, and the corner of the room is behind him we've got it shaded out. You can even do things like this, by the way, where you have really bright windows, but it's on a dark wall, and the window has this great cast light. But this is still considered one volume, right? But at the same time, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then this division of space here, it's, if you still look at it, there's the top of the head and the top of the window in this sort of small void space here, and then here's the bottom of the window that works as the same framing element. But, we're looking at this tilted camera moving up. It's still the same underlying thing. So it's a lot of fun to play with these. It's a lot of fun to explore potential images. Okay, so like here's another one. Okay, I don't know if people remember Battlestar Galactica, but I'm going to reduce those spaceships down to little triangles. And if you've got your spaceships that are all flying in space with one another, a really good way to make sure that you know that this is foreground, this is background, or midground at least, they're the same size, would be to place the other ship so that one slightly overlaps the other. And that tells us that this is closer than this is, right? But you can still do the same thing with, these images separated from one another. And a way to do that, just imagine this is all black in the background. Give me a sec, I'll fill that in. So if this is space back here, and we've got our spaceships moving across it, one of the things that we can do is have a high amount of light on this image, this spaceship in the foreground, and these two smaller ships that we know are the same size, if we have them slightly grayed and not as high contrast in value as this one is, you can still have their rocket trails as they're flying along. But then you've done this fun thing where we've got our third here, we've got our third there, we've got our third here, we've got our third there. But at the same time, we know we've got foreground, midground, space, background, light, intermediate, dark. So, I don't know if this is a benefit for folks or not. I hope it is. So, one of the things that I thought I would do would be to grab a random book off the shelf, and let's beat this up. Let's look at a lot of these images. Now I've got, here's I got a cine book over here. This is a picture, a photo novel of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The film by Steven Spielberg. This is something close and small and easy to utilize. Now, here's a shot right off the hop. Okay? So, if we look at this shot, I'll switch to a black if that gives more clarity. I'll move our page up higher, so I hope that people have made note of that stuff. Now, if we look at this composition right away, in the first panel, you see you've got your, you charged up, you know. Okay, you do. And wake them up. Wake up, good. So, if we draw our frame of reference, okay, and now we've got this line that runs across the center of the composition, but we've got this secondary line of the airplane as it sits here on the ground, okay? And there's some characters that are standing in front of it. But in the foreground here, we've got the translator and the scientist. And the two of them are saying, "Are you telling me it's this? Are you crazy?" And the other guy says, "Will tell you what else could it be?" Well, actually, he says everything in French. But so here's some fun we've got. Now, this information here, as light as it is in the image, Okay, there's a third right there. There's a third right there. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Right? But then we've got foreground, midground, background in that image as well. Yolanda says, I was just talking about that movie the other day. The mashed potato scene is classic. You know what my favorite part is in the mashed potato scene? It's where, but it's related to it. It's where somebody says, if, I don't know, how are we going to get around to the other side? He says, oh, there's this little path that cuts through here on the mountain. And they all look at him and go, I didn't have that many in my drawings from all these people that were replicating the Devil's Mountain site from images broadcast into their head by the aliens. But because Richard Dreyfuss not only worked with the potatoes, but then completely destroyed their house by, building this massive reconstruction of it in the living room, because he saw it as a three-dimensional construct, he could think of that. But at first, it just looks like he's playing with, of course, he's playing with potatoes, but his brain isn't looking at it as a flat two-dimensional image. His brain is looking at it in a three-dimensional form. And I have always found that to be crazy interesting. It changes the way that, it changes the perspective of how you look at, locality. And it changes the way of how we look at representation of an image, representation of a thing. I find that really compelling. So anyways, the first page I open up to, the first image we open up to, there's our thirds. And depending on how they represent the images in the book from the shots on the screen, because they've got this this embossing of the image over top this flat borderline that's on the page. But on this image, here's another complete frame. And in this complete frame, we've got our three characters standing here. Hey, who likes toothpaste? Oh, I love toothpaste. I don't know if there's any. And there's a palm tree of some kind. And we see the shadows that they're casting off of them is another clear definition of our plane. But the fun thing is that we get into this second pillar that's happening here in the foreground. And then from this point forward, where the gentleman is sitting there at the shop, and we've got all these complex lines for the shop and the Coke sign and all this business, and a continuation of that diagonal line that moves here as it moves through the front of the shop. 1, 2, 3, and then you've got 1, 2, 3. Right? You've got this implied diagonal line across here. You've got this implied diagonal line across there. You've got the verso of that happening over here. That's the good stuff. It says, oh, I'm so sorry. I was drawing off screen. I really apologize. I'm doing my best on that one. I blew it. I already blew it. Sorry. Thanks, Yolanda. Okay, so there's our first one, okay, that replicates this. And then here's our second one that replicates this scene and helps us to understand 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right? And then the diagonals of it as well with these shadow, the lines from the legs of the character and the diagonal of this guy's feet. Like these three characters as they're standing here with this cage, and the line that's from this object or the vehicle in the background, and then you've got your implied diagonals that are happening here. So whatever it is, thank you for letting me know I went off screen, off that edge. Here's another example. We'll do this in portrait format. This is a landscape format. This is a portrait format. You have got this guy and this guy. Here's this guy sitting here, and here's this fella leaning over. I'm trying to say, hey, what's your favorite kind of Cheetos? The regular ones or the barbecue flavored? Okay, but in the background, we've got these divisions of color here, these divisions of value here, I'm sorry. So, whether conscious to us or not, we see thirds here, okay? We see thirds here. You know, it just keeps going. Doesn't even a shot like that, even an image like that tells us a great deal, you know, and moves our eye around. There's another example, and any of these images on this page follows this rule. So when you're sitting down and watching a film, and if you have the affordance of opportunity to do so, pause it, you know, and wherever you pause it, scribble that shot. Break it down into basic shapes and scribble that shot up. Whatever it is, here we go with this one. I'll do the sort of talking here because I draw with stuff all the time in my sketchbook. That's why they call me Mr. Whiskers. So here's our air traffic controller in the foreground, and his arm moves across here. Okay? Now, you would think that because the rest of this composition is this large dark circle, that this image is, while there's a symmetry to the weight and balance of the information that's in this image, okay, because this shape is not, it's analogous to the other shapes, you would think it would be unbalanced. But it's not. There's your thirds. There's one, there's another. Right? You've got your collar sticking up here in the bottom, right? Well, that's a point. Point pushes a direction. And then the arm pushes another direction. So there's another third. And it runs to where the lip of the frame touches the corner, or well, it's corner, the edge of the sphere. So there's another third, right? Same thing in reverse, off of this line, off of this line. There's your point of interest. Okay, you know, is this helping? I can do a couple more, I don't mind. So if we've got, let's see what time it is. If we've got this image here, and you've got the one guy leaning forward, make sure I'm in frame. You've got the next guy leaning forward, but this guy in the foreground is valued out, right? He's not really of importance. The importance is these two guys as they're looking at whatever that is in the foreground, that they're you know, the air traffic control device. So, but there's this sort of toning out in the background behind them. So our focus is here, but there's still a stage composition, right? It's, you know, it's just successful image making. Same thing again with this, same thing again with this, same thing again with that. Look at it. Now you've got, even though this is far more complex with far more people in it, it's still, you know, Yolanda says, I have to go in. Thanks, Christopher. Thank you for hanging out with Yolanda. It's nice to see you. And Linda's joined. Hi, Linda. I started early today. So, there we go. This is breaking down our panels using these three values, right? You've got your black, you've got your intermediate or gray, and you've got your white. get this out of the way so that flattens the color. I'm so sorry for that, flaring it out. So then you've got your foreground, your midground, your background, and you can define those in these three values. And then you're looking at your composition to be divided up in thirds. And if you can implement those things, you're going to make more interesting compositions. And the way to study this and to develop that is what I was just doing, of pulling open a random book and representing the basic shape of these scenes, and using basic shapes. And if you want to start with the real basics of, circle, square, triangle, that works. But what this is helping us to do is to understand how the image itself is broken down. And the weight of a thing, so this is where we get into Hoffman, Hans Hoffman, the teacher of the abstraction school in Long Island, New York in the 50s. Hoffman talked about the push and pull of color and the push and pull of value. And so if you've got an image, whether it's upright or side to, profile or landscape, if you've got, say, this square here, this rectangular shape here, and up above it, you have this dark volume. And then the remainder of this image is this gray volume, but you've got this high contrast white box in the center. Even though this is smaller than this is, and of course, weight-wise, this is roughly the same shape as that, or the same square, inch or meter, yard, whatever it is, for measurement, as these two are the same size. There's a balance in a division of this because of how that works within the space. Whatever the information is that's here compared to the information that's there, it all gets equal focus. And all of it draws our attention to this area right here in the center because of its allocation in space. But the thirds are not equally divided because this is more of, 2/5. Let's break it down into fourths, right? This is more like a 2/4, and this is 1/4, 1/4. So, and the same thing would be applied if we were to have, here's our dark color up in here, and you've got, this little house in the desert. Here's the night sky, whatever it is, and then here's the person in our foreground who's walking up to this little house in the desert. Okay. What we've got going on though is a division of space. Follows the top of his head across to here, or the bottom of the building, and it's still thirds. It still breaks all down as thirds. So if we look at any images in front of us that we're studying and try to apply this, and this, utilizing something as basic as that within, of course, a frame of reference. Then it's going to help us to understand more complex images. So doing things like this, and the whole reason that I've been talking about this for the last hour, doing things like this are only going to make you develop more as a person who's creating visual images. You can't do a whole bunch of these without it having affectations change on how you look at things and how your sense of aesthetics develops. You can draw a few of these and go, oh, okay. And then you start looking at stuff around you and go, oh, okay. You can also draw 100 of these before it sort of dawns on you. But at some point, it's going to dawn on people that, oh, there's a difference to how this person frames something as to how that person frames something. Now, this person here is the greatest illustrator ever known to man. This person is the worst, as far as it goes for drawing style. Okay. But because they both get how to put together the composition, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to still free associate with aesthetically enjoying this image over here, more so than all the spit and polish in this one. Just because you can do all these things, you can apply all these things to whatever skill level that people are at, whatever drawing ability that people might have, but it's still, the reader is still going to have their preferences. So, okie dokie. So I thought, I'd look at a bit of that today, right? Now I haven't picked out. That gets to this toupee. I got a suggestion from Yolanda. Guy gets. Oh, Guy gets a Gothic toupee. Boy, I can't read my own handwriting. So that's the suggestion, is a guy gets a Gothic toupee. So that's what I'll start working on now. And I just wanted to try some of these things and explore this a little bit. This is one of my sketchbooks where I'm constantly drawing over top of characters on top of characters. And I use different colors or whatever. Maybe it'll separate the image a little bit from myself. And at the same time, I'm doing, pencil crayon studies of things and utilizing whatever tools in order to build up images. And this is just pure exploration of image, right? These little things will shop. But more and more of this. So if you can, this is me studying shapes and form of figures and characters. It's all just, it's objects, right? It's all just exploration, development. Sketchbooks aren't meant to be pretty. They're just not. I think a far more functional way to use your sketchbook is ugly. There's an ugliness and a confusion in this that other people might look at and go, I don't know what's going on this page. But we do. So we're winning 1-0. Okay, so that's I got today's suggestion for an idea. Let's walk through this idea. A guy, right? Guy gets a Gothic, I love alliteration, toupee. Whether I spelled this correctly or not, I does not know. And this is Yolanda that suggested this. So that'll be today's page. Now, okay, so I'm going to move this up so we got some workable space. And let's look at our 3 basic points of this is our guy. He gets a toupee, but it's a Gothic toupee. Okay? So, there's a couple ideas that we can do this. Is the toupee what's Gothic, right? Is the guy bald or not, which is why he's getting a toupee in the first place? So you start thinking about all the correlations of these different elements. So if you've got bald business person, okay? So we'll start off with our bald business person, right? And he's toupee shopping. Finally brings the courage up to go and get himself a toupee. So he's gone out to find the toupee. He finds a Gothic one, with and probably displayed in some kind of gothy kind of way. But it reminds him of his love of Flock of Seagulls from his youth. whatever it is. And so he picks, so we'll write down our flock of seagulls joke. And he buys it for himself, but nobody was prepared for the affectation of this toupee on his head. So as he comes into work the next day, you have him all dressed up as a Gothic guy. So now he's the Gothic businessman. Right? So there's 4 beats of story. But it takes those 3 different points that we can find within the suggestion itself. Guy gets toupee. But the extra twist of information in toupee, it's Gothic. Pardon me with the yawning today. I don't know what the heck is going on. But I'm fully awake. Drinking coffee, no less, but you get a day for yawns. That's the day. So the Gothic part of it implies if the toupee is Gothic, he is not. Right? The guy is not. But by wearing a Gothic toupee, makes that guy Gothic. So then you see your characters change from non-Gothic toupee Gothic, right? So that sort of tells us how to break down our page. We draw business guy, goes toupee shopping, fond reminiscence of his days of love of flock of seagulls and their hairstyles. If you don't know who flock of seagulls are, there's your homework. Go look it up. Their whole shtick was their crazy hair. And also one of the first in-studio music performances on like a video show, like a video channel. Chris has jumped in. Hiya, Chris. Hiya. Like the pink hands. Somebody's working in pink paint. So there's the 4 points of today's composition. So based off the suggestion from Yolanda. So if I want to look at this in interesting ways and we utilize some of these principles that we have here, we want to introduce our business guy. And this, am I still in frame? I'm going to move this up. So let's start with our first panel. We'll do it in a portrait format. Okay. So here is our business guy. I'm going to do it really silly. We can have him holding a pen. He's got a clipboard as his job is an actuarial, and he's taking stock of the amount of product that this location has. So here's our guy. Okay. Now, shoulder line, elbow line. There's our thirds. Right? We're talking about the principles I've been talking about so far. Here's our third there for our image. So we've locked in our guy and his image. And so let's get more creative with our frame of reference or our camera. If we look at our shot as over Baldy's shoulder, that is not nice. And so his shoulder is starting to develop this diagonal line in our frame. Okay? So if we put him in front of a window that has a display of people's wigs or toupees, and within this one we've got a crazy hair like the flock of seagulls. There's this division of space, there's this division of space, right? So there's our thirds again. So this one works, even if you have this is brick here, and this is brick going this way. It's still, because of the value system, we've got the heavy silhouette in the foreground, we've got the gray tone in the window display. The rest of this information here it fits within this tonal value. So we still got our black foreground, white midground, and gray background. right? So there's our, but we've also applied our thirds in there. So there's our guy gets to pay, and so let's shake it up again. We can have our guy hand on chin as he fondly reminisces. Have him holding his elbow. As he fondly reminisces, we can even do the whole bubble. Memory bubble, dream bubble, thought bubble, I guess it is. And then here's the flock of seagulls on stage playing their music with their crazy hair. You know what? I love flock of seagulls when I was young. I'm going to do it. Love them? I'm going to do it. There's his text spaces, right? So we cut back to a similar shot as our first shot now, right? Where he's at his workplace again. And we can change up. So we've also got a directional thing happening here, by the way. And we can shake it up at the end where we've got our guy and his changed persona here as he's still looking at his record keeping, and he's got his clipboard in front, making sure he's holding the clipboard in the right hand, which is that one. And he's standing here in the foreground, and then we've got a wall of inventory in behind him. But on top of that head is the craziest toupee you've ever seen. Somewhat like a flock of seagulls haircut. And a big smile on his face. So there's a quick breakdown of today's page. Now, I tend not to do breakdowns. I tend not to work from scripts. And the reason for those two things is once I've done this, half of the fun of drawing it is gone from me. Like, it's just because plotting all of this there's an energy to that. And I've done a lot of this work here in my head. In the process of doing it, as soon as the idea kicks in, I'll draw an account doing that. And just while I'm drawing the account, I go, I'm looking at the window wanting a flock of seagulls too bad. All right, and then I'll have him, remember, and as I'm drawing and looking in the window, I'm like, and let's draw the flock of seagulls on the stage, How can make that interesting? But make sure the focus is still on our business guy. And then the big punchline of him standing at the workplace with all of the shelves of stock, and he's being an actuarial and make sure, let's have all the things counted correctly. So we've now got this divisional line. We can have the polished floors of the store in a darker value, right? And then we've got the complexity of the ceiling of Home Depot, not Home Depot, what's that? Costco, right? So we've got this kind of dark value on the floor, intermediate value for the wall, and light value for the rooftop, for the ceiling. I think that's about got it for me. I started early today. I apologize for anybody that's thrown out by my schedule change. But I got a couple things I want to do this afternoon. But it'll give me an opportunity to check out what other friends are doing at the same time around this time. I really enjoyed doing a nighttime stream the other day. And I may well do one tonight. But the one that I do tonight, I think it's not going to be about doing this one-page story. I think that because I can put this together, at some point early in the evening. But I think that when I come back later on tonight, probably around 10:30, 11, to stream, I'm going to do a painting. I'm going to be painting tonight. And I'm looking forward to it. And hopefully you're looking forward to it if you come and check it out. I've shown, I think this is in camera, up on the wall here, there's a study I did from a Caravaggio, and I really enjoy this kind of approach to painting. So we're gonna do a portrait tonight in paint. Whether I record it as a video or do it live, I'm heavily leaning towards doing it live. But if you're interested in your own, you're more than welcome to come and join and check it out. The page as laid down from the suggestion here, Guy Gets Gothic Toupee, will be posted for tomorrow. You'll be able to see the original art for it as well on our Patreon. That's about it for me. Thank you, everybody, for coming and hanging out. Chris says I'm on a short break from class, so I cannot watch complete streams. Oh, I completely understand that. Yeah, it's hard to watch streams when I find when I'm doing streams the same time every day, and it's hard to watch streams when you're engaged in other things like, work or the work we're doing at home or whatever it is. Completely get it. So I know it's an early stream to sign off on, folks, and I apologize if that's disruptive for your scheduled afternoon. You're more than welcome to go back and watch the whole of this stream that I started at 1 o'clock, where I start walking through this tutorial on, how we apply a composition utilizing some basic rules and how it improves composition when we have these sort of principles in the back of our mind as we're putting together images. But feel free to go back and check that out. And I hope thumbs up and tell all your friends. Tell a whole bunch. Somebody just finished that little ditty in their head. I know it for a fact. Okay, but that's about it for me today. Got to get a couple things going, and I will be. If I don't see you tonight, I will see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. EST. Bye for now. Thanks very much.